Okay, so welcome to a special class on Mashiach. And hopefully by next week, we're not going to have to give the class again. Because Mashiach will be teaching us Torah. It says, Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitze, a new Torah will come from me. And Mashiach is going to teach in a visual way. So that's why all the Torah that we've studied up until Mashiach is actually considered reichos. It's considered just like smell versus oil. Like you can smell a scent. It's like just a tiny bit, and then imagine taking that oil, or the olden days they would or if you think about it, you have like a cream. So imagine the difference between smelling it and feeling it. There's that. It's so much deeper. So everything that we're in this world until the times of Mashiach is really kind of it's kind of just a taste, because really the whole premise of this world, really, as we know, that there's a book, the first book of Kabbalah that was written by Avraham Avinu, and that is called Sefer Yetzirah, right? And Sefer Yetzirah is built on three words, which is Olam, Shana, Nefesh, and that means time, space, soul. So in other words, where are we? We are in a time, space dimension. And in that time-space dimension, it's actually, both according to Kabbalah as well as science, the world began in the size of a mustard seed, and all the matter that exists is actually that size, because all the size was compacted into there. And then Hashem basically expanded time and space, and they call it the Big Bang. And there's actually what they call the background microwave radiation. You should take a look at this. It's very interesting. There's an image, because the radiation of that initial, if you want to call it, I wouldn't call it explosion, but an initial blast that Hashem blasted time and space into existence, and it continues to go. I don't know if you know this. There's a big question in science, which is, is the universe expanding? Is it contracting? Is it going to expand and contract? And the reason Hubble Space Telescope was put in the sky, this massive telescope. Why do you put a telescope in the sky? Because over here you have what they call light pollution, so you can't see properly. So over there you don't have any light pollution. You can see for billions of miles. So it turns out, and it took them 10 years to figure this out, that the universe not only is always expanding, but it's getting faster and faster. So at the edges of its expansion, it goes 10 times as fast. So it's like a guy that blew up a balloon, but it's so perfect that at the outside just keeps on going and going and going and going. But there's actually an image of the whole universe. It's the first 300,000th second of the creation, where it's basically an egg, and that energy is still here because it's the background radiation energy. So why am I saying that? Just to say that this is what Sefer Yetzirah says, that we are in this egg. And what are we? We are perceivers of our egg. We're perceivers of our world. And of course, having a mind, right, the senses perceive the physical. The mind can go beyond the physical. The mind can go, wow, there's Hashem that made this whole thing. So until the coming of Mashiach, we basically are in this paradigm of discovery. But how are we discovering? We're discovering as the observer within the observation. So even Avraham Avinu, that's so smart, how did he discover God? He realized, well, if the sun is coming and the moon is coming and it's all working together, there must be a God. So in other words, his mind told him there's a God. There's a famous saying that says, I think, therefore I am. But there's a problem with that saying. What's the problem? Who is the am that is thinking? He's saying, I think, therefore I exist. But who is the existence that is thinking? You didn't define who you are. You just said, I must exist because I'm thinking. But you still didn't define who's thinking. So the thinker, and this is what science can tell us, but Judaism can, because mysticism goes into the soul, is that we are neshamas. We are the spark of God, because consciousness and life has to come from God, right? Nothing creates nothing. Something can create something. And God, which is life, can create life. God has the capacity, obviously, to observe. So what are we? We are living, breathing, thinking, feeling observers. We're observing. There's this guy, he's actually a Christian guy, but a very bright scientist, and his wife became, I guess she became Christian, but a believer. And he wrote a whole book how like how science, because he came from a scientific perspective, how everything is so exact, it's not possible. Like things are exact, like if little equations, like, if gravity like was a tiny decimal point off, nothing would exist. All these that was his whole book. But the bottom line is, he said the world was made in such a way that we could discover. So for example, if at daytime, you can't see past the universe. But at nighttime, somehow, you can see for billions of miles. It's an amazing thing. You think about it.
Right, in the darkness.
In the dark, you can see for billions of miles. You can see galaxies that are billions of light years away. You can see it. The fact that this water here is clear, the fact that the air is clear, air is a substance. It could have been, green. You could just see it. But God made a discoverable world, a world that we can literally find out facts. So in other words, when you think about that, you actually realize not how big we are, how small we are. Because we are this tiny little guy with a magnifying glass saying, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. You know what I mean? And all of science is just that guy with that, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. That's what it is. So we're the observer in the observation, getting the observation when God wanted us to get it. That's what we're the observer.
Let me
Go ahead.
But Sefer Yetzirah is the first book ever written.
The first book of Kabbalah is actually, I would say, Raziel HaMalach. Raziel was an angel, and he gave a book to
Raziel
HaMalach.
He was an angel?
Raziel's an angel. Most angels, they end with a kel, right? Michael, Gabriel, Raziel. And he gave a book to Adam HaRishon. And they say in this book, you can see the whole future. A lot of people keep that book in the house to protect from fires.
The name of that book is?
Raziel. Ra-Z-L. Z. As in Zebi.
Yeah.
Raziel. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hamalach. You have a late note?
What?
I was joking.
Oh. Okay.
Raziel HaMalach.
Do you want some water?
Oh, yeah.
This is the name of the book, and it's also the name of the angel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, wow, look at this. We got a big crowd. We have to try to get 10 Jews. They say when you have 10 Jews, you have the Shekhinah. So, Raziel HaMalach. And then...
Who gave it to Adam HaRishon?
He gave it to Adam HaRishon, yeah.
Okay.
And then the next book is called Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is a book of creation, and it's a very important book. It's 32 small paragraphs, and in it is like the basis and foundation of all of Kabbalah. And Sefer Yetzirah is built on 3 words: Olam, Shana, Nefesh, which means time, space, and soul.
So it's 32 pages, and it's about the
32
whole
paragraphs,
and it's about the whole.
It's the foundation of Kabbalah. Kabbalah very much about creation. It's very much, a lot of it's very...
You can get the book now.
Yeah, there's a translation from Aryeh Kaplan. It's very difficult. It's very complicated, very mathematical. It's not a simple book by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of the premise, like the 10 spheres, the Hebrew letters, a lot of the premises, very fundamental ideas are in that book. So Avraham Avinu basically was a Kabbalistic researcher. That's what he was. He was a researcher into God. And so that's why it says Avraham was generous with his time, with his soul, and with his money. He gave time to people and his soul, because his passion was really study of Kabbalah. And yet he also, you may not know this, but Avraham Avinu wrote 400 books or 400 chapters on idolatry. The Rebbe says it means on ego. And it's very interesting because it says that they sent his sons to the east, and the whole thing about the Eastern religions are all about ego, so it's an interesting correlation. But in any event, getting back to the subject, the idea is, and this is what I said, the idea is that, so what is Mashiach? You see, so in order to understand Mashiach, in a way you have to understand what is exile, and then you'll be able to, then you'll be able to understand the transition of exile to redemption and how you could actually transition into that now. Because that was really one of the big points of the Rebbe. A lot of people, if I may just say this, both Mashiachistan and non-Mashiachistan don't get it. Why? Because it's not a question so much like, are we in Mashiach? Are we not in Mashiach? The question is much more, what is Mashiach? And once you know what is Mashiach, then you can step into Mashiach. The Rebbe told Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu's father, who's a great Kabbalist, great man, he said a very fascinating statement. He said, Mashiach is so close that you can bring him in. Now, whoever heard of Mashiach that you can bring in? We always heard of Mashiach that's going to bring us in. So in other words, the Alter Rebbe said, I've said this before, Alter Rebbe said the Mashiach that's coming no one's waiting for, and the Mashiach that everyone's waiting for isn't coming. So it's not to say that what we're waiting for isn't coming, we're going to have the basement, we're going to have all the things, but the real Mashiach is a concept. And if you understand the concept, you can have it now. Right? So that's what my goal in this class is, to tell you what is that concept of Mashiach. Okay, so of course I'm not, God forbid, quoting myself. It's based on all the sichos, the talks to Rabbi. I did have the privilege of taking out quotes of pretty much of all of the last years, the Mem Chesed and Beis, and gone through it a couple of times. So I feel I have a decent understanding. Okay, so the story is like this. We said that until the coming of the Mashiach, who is the observer? We are the observer. It says this in Chassidus. Even Avraham Avinu, who discovers God and God speaks to him, but who did he discover first? I think, therefore I am. Actually, the first person you discovered was yourself. Whether you realize it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not. Who started demanding? Me, right? I need food, I need this, I need that. Is there a God? How's this? So in other words, the whole premise of reality starts from this tiny little guy with a microscope looking for the truth. Mashiach is where the whole thing gets flipped up on its head. Mashiach is Chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov was the beginning of the coming of Mashiach, the revelation of Hashem. In other words, now you could say, well, Hashem gave us the Torah, but still, even the Torah, in a certain sense, was made for the box. In other words, obviously there are infinite layers, but the general layer of the Torah, what we call Nigla, is made for the box. In other words, okay, you're a Jew, like it says, don't kill. I mean, that's a pretty profound, basic statement. Don't steal. In other words, the Torah is made for a person living in this world, and it's saying, okay, here's the behavior guidelines. And in fact, the Chayvus HaLevavos says this. He says the Torah is really just the middle of the way. Really, why did he write this book? Very good book. Everybody should study it, Duties of the Heart. He said that after the great Tanoim and Amoraim, they studied the Torah. What did they do? They knew all the halachas. Now they went deeper. Okay, how do I have to behave? How do I have to feel? They tried to work on their emotions. That's really what Chassidus is, to go to the depth of our personalities, the depth and the nuances. There's a great rabbi that wrote a book on Lashon Hara, and he wanted the Rebbe Rashab to give a approbation. And the Rebbe Rashab said that he's not giving approbation because he didn't speak about Lashon Hara in the mind, right? So Chassidus, there's another famous story where I think it was Pinchas Rezus, that his father was the Av Basin of Shklov, and he was a Masnagid. Pinchas became a Chassid. These were towering giants and great minds. So he said, what did Chassidus innovate? Before Chassidus, you had, written here in Sfas, a book called Reishis Chachma. It basically is like a Shulchan Aruch based out of Kabbalah. Very interesting book. It takes all the ideas of Kabbalah and how to eat and how to this, how to that. So he said to his father, I'll show you. He says, come, let's go for a ride. And meanwhile, he paid the wagon driver some money. And the wagon driver, he said, make this the worst ride my father has ever had. And the guy's bearing here, bearing there, and this. Now, before he actually took this ride, they studied together Reishis Chachma Shar HaAnova. Shar HaAnova is the gateway to humility. And for 2 weeks, he was learning about humility. Okay, so now he knew that he's meant to be humble. So after the ride, he tells his father, how did you feel about the ride? So the father says, listen, I didn't say anything to the guy. In fact, I tipped him. He says, yeah, but how did you feel in your heart? So he quoted what Bilam said to his donkey, Lu yesh cherev biyoti, if I had a sword in my hand. He says, that's the difference. It's very profound. Chassidus is able to bring you to the state that your heart is good. Right? That's the goal. That it's not only, oh, my behavior is good. No, my heart is good. And this is why so many thousands and millions of hours of Chassidus was poured into us. This is why we got the role models from the Baal Shem Tov and from the Rebbe. I have a dear friend, and he said to me, it's not Chabad, it's not fully Orthodox, but he said, I see clearly, he says that Chabad, Baal Shem Tov, they saved Judaism. Because this is a Judaism that people want to engage in. You come to this guy, interesting, they interviewed him. When Chabad first came to California, so you see Chabad and they're making a Purim thing or something. And he said, I saw that the Rebbe trained these people well. It was a very profound statement because the Rebbe really trained people not to judge, to go out with real love. And that's really the secret of Chabad. They have studies now that the only movement, believe it or not, that is really engaging Jews is Chabad, at least in the kind of the secular Jews. So, yeah, you want to say? Oh, yeah, yeah. So what's the point? The point is that ultimately, what does Chassidus bring to the table? What does it do that wasn't there before? So there's a very interesting nuance. It's a very tiny nuance. There's a very deep nuance. When I think it was the Rebbe Marash, but maybe it was a Mitzvah Rebbe. To be a Chabad Rebbe, you had to have the schus of being arrested a couple of times. So when he was arrested, somebody once was invited to another Farbrengen. Why? He said, the Mitzvah Rebbe got a jail. He said, how many times were these people arrested? So there was a governor, I don't know, a Russian governor, and he was going to be the kind of judge of the case. So somebody was explaining to the governor what is Chassidus. So he said an interesting thing. He said Chassidus is a wisdom that explains to you what you don't know. And he understood, he says, this is a very deep moral code. Why? Because every moral code that you can understand in a certain nuanced way adds to your ego. That's kind of the problem with science. Science can be very helpful, when does water boil and we have a microwave and all these lovely things. But what can happen is that you start to think, basically what is science? You say you looked with your microscope, you discovered something, you dissected it, and now the brain is a little bit like the stomach. You ate it, you're like, oh, wow, I'm full. So the more you know, kind of the more full of yourself you can get. And that's the problem Chassidus brings down with Aristotle, that Aristotle discovered how the whole world, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the whole world is Hashem. Did it make him humble? No, it made him more arrogant. Because he realized how great he is, that he understands that the whole world is Hashem. But really, what is the whole goal? The whole goal is to realize what you're not what you are. Because the more our ego builds, the more our expectations and our intolerance builds. So you have to have, I did a little video on it today, so I'm not going to go into that whole thing, but you have to have pride, but you have to have pride for the right things, not just an ego pride. And if you have pride for the right things, it's very good. It gives you drive. But if you have just pride in my existence, so that, of course, is a little bit, kind of arrogance, and it's not healthy. So what does Chassidus bring us to? Chassidus brings us to the knowledge that we will never really understand. It brings us to a certain humility. And that's why Chassidus is into davening, right? So some groups are very into learning Torah. Why? Because it feeds my ego. And what does Chassidus feed? Chassidus feeds my neshama. It feeds my humility. It feeds my godliness. And that's the goal here. So now we have a deep understanding of what Mashiach really is. Mashiach is not a place that takes us out of reality. Mashiach, it's called Augmented. There's virtual reality. Put these glasses on and oh wow, everything is virtual. Then there's what's called Augmented reality. Like you could put in this room, like you walk in the room And like you have these glasses on, over there you see the Rashbi, and he gives you a little Torah, and the Arizal over there. Augmented, we're actually working on it. In Spot, you'll be able to put on glasses and have the Ari speak to you and things like that. So it's augmented reality. So what is Mashiach? Mashiach is augmented reality, where Hashem begins to descend into our consciousness and into our reality. So now we understand why we can have Mashiach now, because we could have augmented reality now. So now to take it to the next level is that Mashiach is the revelation of Hashem. The Rebbe says this in a Maimer. What is we call it Mashiach Hashem? Even Mashiach, who is Mashiach? Mashiach is called the Yechido HaKlalos, right? So we all know that we all have a neshama, and the deepest part of the soul is called Yechida. Yechida comes from the word Yachid, it's one with Hashem. And then there's like the Yechida HaKlalos, the source soul of all souls, right? So in a way we call Adam HaRishon a source soul, and Yaakov, the Rebbe of the generation, is called Rosh B'nai Yisrael. All our souls come from the Rebbe of the generation. And then Mashiach is the source of all souls. So he's a source soul. And really, in simple words, it's Hashem. Hashem is the source. And Mashiach gets this Yechida, basically the godliness comes straight into him. And then basically he's able to operate with pure godliness. And that's why he's able, what's called Moirach V'dayin. He's able to smell and judge. He's able to see everything from a godly perspective. So what is Mashiach? Mashiach is not that the observer is observing the observation, like we said before from Sefer Yetzirah, Olam Shona Nefesh, we're in a time-space soul, we're in an observation, and we're the observer observing the observation, but rather the God, the Creator's perspective, becomes part of the creation's perspective. There's a merger of perspectives, and this is every single sikh. I've had occasion to mention this, but every single talk of the Rebbe, maybe besides two, from Memches to Nun Beis, it's 4 years straight, every single talk of the Rebbe says the same point, which is the merger of the God consciousness and the human consciousness. There's this merger. And that's the marriage of the Jew and Hashem. And of course it says, I'll pour my spirit on all flesh. And it says, that the goyim will go according to your light. So all of this godliness that we have pumped into the universe, because every time we did a mitzvah means tzavs of a connection, we connected Hashem through our mitzvah. So the Jewish people, it says a mitzvah was like, from the lightning comes from a dark cloud. So every time we did a mitzvah, it's like we made a deposit in a bank account. And then when Mashiach comes, and the Rebbe says it's here, the bank account gets opened. He says we've already been given the keys. So what is the bank account? The bank account is Hashem. What's the greatest gift? It says Avram Hashem gave him kol. He gave him everything. What did he give him? He gave him himself. So what is Mashiach? Mashiach is where you and Hashem can operate in synchronicity. And that's it. It's really just that simple. And that's why you can have Mashiach now. You can be married to Hashem. Hashem can be, I guess as women it's easier to get this, but Hashem can be your husband. Hashem can be your other half. And when we download that, and not only we download that, but we live it. So what is Gullus? Gullus is concealment of that fact. Gullus is concealment. Gullus is fear. Gullus is that I'm not stepping into my power, into my truth, that really Hashem is one with me. Now, you can say, well, how can Hashem be one with me? There are greater tzaddikim. But of course, Hashem isn't limited. Hashem would be limited if he could only be one with one person and not one with all people. If a computer can be one with all people, right now, we can be, 1 billion people can be asking Google questions, and it can be answering them all at the same time. That's really quite amazing when you think about that. 1 billion communications at the same time from the same computer. That's what's going on, right? GPS. 1 billion cars are going, really, as we speak now, probably there are 1 billion communications on the same system. AI, another 1 billion people using the same system, even the WhatsApp. WhatsApp's ultimately is just a computer. There's 1 billion, I love it. Sometimes you go to Google, Play Store or Apple, and you're downloading an app, and like how many? 1 billion, like, you're telling me 1 out of 8 people on this planet or have this on their phone? Like, it's unbelievable. And remember that whole thing is connected to one brain. It's able to deal with like billions of equations at the same time. So if a silly computer can do that, a tiny little microchip can do that, God can deal with everyone at the same time.
Individually.
Individually. He can be your God and my God. It's not taking away. And sometimes actually, when you become spiritual and God, reveal, I've said it before, but I came to Tzfat, I said, wow, I finally met my tribe, So there's a very holy Jew here in Tzfat. I said that spiritual people, he said, have to be careful from arrogance. You can be arrogant. Oh, wow, like I'm connected to God. Yes, but he's also connected to everyone else, right? It's not an exclusive connection, So the point is that this, I want to finish with this and then bring out another point. So in conclusion with this, what is Mashiach ultimately? Of course, we're going to have the Beis HaMikdash, and it should happen immediately, and let's dedicate this class that the hostages should come free, and all those that died on Kiddush Hashem, for all the thousands of years they died because they're Jews, and those that suffered, and those that are soldiers, and those that lost limbs, they should all come back. Mashiach's going to come. So make it all infinitely good. It should happen now. The schus of all the Yidden, if nothing else, the Mesiras Nefesh should happen immediately. So Mashiach's going to literally make a beautiful, physically beautiful, perfect world. However, that's not what it's about. What is it about? It's about your relationship with God. And that can happen right now. And so the only question then is, how do I get over my fears? And in a certain sense, you can use your ego. Because the positive side of ego is, yes, Hashem is communicating with me. Yes, I am a Jew. Yes, we are in the times of Mashiach. Yes, the Rebbe, if you want to believe this, is Mashiach. Yes, we are the generation of Mashiach. Yes, it's here. Yes, this is good. And once you have that convictions, if you look at, if we can say it, the Mashiachistim, they're much more happy. Why? Because they have those convictions. And if those convictions are there and they're strong, you're good to go. And that's that. What does the Yetzer Hara try to do? He tries to create doubt. He tries to
Fear.
Yeah, fear. That's his job, to make you not be. I was once on a plane, so I saw this documentary. It's called Merchants of Doubt. It was a very, very fascinating documentary.
Merchants of Doubt.
It's called Merchants of Doubt. So basically, there are these scientists, good scientists, but not in medicine or other things. They're scientists, let's say, in physics, but people believe, it's a scientist. So the tobacco industry, I don't know if you know this, but there was 7,000 studies that cigarettes kill people before the Surgeon General came out with a warning. So it's very terrible that in Israel people are still smoking. It's terrible. But in any event, it's good to tell people. I tell people a lot, like, whatever. You should be able to stop this. And almost invariably, nobody takes offense because people want to stop. They're just addicted to it. So bless everyone to get rid of the Yetzer Hara, rid of addictions. But the bottom line is that, all these addictions that we have, it's all Yetzer Haras, right? So Mashiach comes, we're going to get rid of these Yetzer Haras in a very revealed way. But now we have to strengthen ourselves. And that's why we have to daven and we have to do these things. So this other point that I want to bring out kind of just occurred to me as some of you are in my WhatsApp group. I have kind of a Hasidic spamming situation going on. And it occurred to me that there's a very important concept here that we just touched on, which is the difference between being a victim or chosen. If you think about it, as Jewish people, we could have really kind of been psychologically messed up. Why? Because so much bad happened to us. And you look at different groups, whether, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but American Indians, I remember driving through a place with reservations. It was like a big sign, like, Indians don't beat their wives, you know what I mean? They basically became drunks, and they lost their self-esteem, and not good things happened from it. The Arabs, basically, all their, extreme, within themselves, extreme sadism, their treatment of women is horrific. But it all comes from this internal shame that they have, which actually came from getting kicked out of the house. We don't think about it. But Yishmael was 13. He was the heir to Avraham Avinu. And so this was a very kind of negative process. And so there are different groups, even till today. I mean, I don't know all the different groups, but groups that take on these like victim identities. And nothing good comes from that. Oh, the whole world has to give to me. But like the Jewish people, after a Holocaust, in a couple of years, they started a country which, Baruch Hashem, now we're living in, is one of the most powerful countries in the world. And if things just naturally continue the way they are, it's going to be probably the superpower soon. And then, even just look at my own grandfather, he lost his entire family, and then he goes off and he becomes a rabbi, and he, not that this is the definition of anything, but he became very wealthy. And in other words, they built a future. So why? Because we knew a very simple thing. We were chosen. And what happens to us is not a punishment. What happens to us is part of a destiny. And as long as you can look at your life, that everything that happened to you wasn't, maybe the Alter Rebbe says clearly, if somebody was malicious to you, okay, that was wrong, and obviously there's justice in this world, and whether it's in this lifetime or another lifetime, they'll have to pay for it. There's no sin that goes unpunished. Everything gets worked out. But in our own lives, we have to know that we've been chosen to be the people of Mashiach. We've been chosen to be the generation of Mashiach. It's not a small thing. It's not a small thing to be chosen to get a direct relationship with God. That doesn't happen simple. It never happened in human history. Everybody was struggling through the Torah mitzvahs and doing their thing, and they didn't have it. Only the big tzaddikim. When Mashiach comes, it says, "V'nivu b'nei chonei seichem," your sons and daughters will become prophets. That's us, me and you. We have been chosen to be the generation that brings Mashiach, the righteous Jewish women. Mashiach comes because of you. You're the ones bringing Mashiach for the world, for eternity, for history. So it's a big merit. It's a big schus. And when you realize that, it's like, So I met this lady, she was a Holocaust survivor. Most people, they carry scars. But she was like very positive. She told me, Nish gefährlich. You know what nish gefährlich means? It wasn't so bad.
My gosh.
And she was this woman. One thing about her, she had a lot of pride. Why? She learned in Beis Yaakov. Now, Beis Yaakov was a very special movement. Why? Because Beis Yaakov, there were many clever girls, and unfortunately, it was a time of enlightenment, and the girls weren't getting education, so they were learning, books and science, and they were leaving. So Sarah Schneer, a big tzaddikas, she created Beis Yaakov, and she really gave them pride. There was a tremendous pride they had. Today that a woman learns Torah is not such a surprise. They have great scholars. But in those days, it was like such a pride. Wow, she told me, Ich bin a gelernte. I'm a knowledgeable one. So this, and even they say the girls in the Beis Yaakov girls, even in the Holocaust, they were so positive. In other words, they had a positive identity. And that's one of the secrets of life. Manis Friedman, my wife, is listening to different podcasts. The other day, he says, people try to be happy. Oh, I got to do this to be happy. That. He says, being happy is being yourself. In other words, being happy is being proud of yourself. So if you can be proud of yourself because you've been chosen by Hashem, which is the truth, so much of the world respects us just because we're Jews, because we're the chosen people. So we have to respect ourselves too, because we are the chosen people. Hashem did choose our souls to be the ones to have this special relation. And remember, we're not just us, we're a Gilgulim. We've been in this world. It says, Dar Hailach Dar Ba, generation goes, a generation comes. It's the same generation. We did all six, like Rizal says, you have to do all 613 mitzvahs, besides the mitzvah that the king does that, like having an extra Torah for everybody else, but we all did. So we've been here many times. We're like real heroes. Even if not in this lifetime, but in a previous lifetime. Even more so, we say in this lifetime, the Moshe Rabbeinu was most impressed of our generation, of who? Of the Baalei Tshuva, because nobody gets religious and everybody celebrates them. They're like, what happened to you? You lost your mind, join the program. So my grandmother, she was a very powerful woman. But long story short, I'm very shkach pratis. I heard the story that my aunt, Henya Lane, so she, at a bas mitzvah of one of his granddaughters, she said the story that after, perestroika, after they let the Jews out of Russia, so they had some cousins, Shagala of cousins that came, and they weren't some of them were married out, and some of them there was not much left of the family, but they were a family, and they came to a wedding. Henya had a wedding, and I remember one of the family weddings. The photographer says, "Is this a family or a city?" My great grandmother, Bab Mayasha, when she passed, she had over 700 descendants. Rebbe once said to her, half of Chabad comes to you. In my class in Torah, I would say like 20% of the class were her grandchildren. That's just my class. So in other words,
I know him, yeah.
Henya's special. So in any event, so Henya said the story. So this lady, she was crying. So Henya said to her, don't cry. The next picture, you'll go into the picture. So he says, I'm not crying because of this picture. I'm crying because we thought Mayasha was out of her mind. In other words, every single Jew became part of the Communist Party, not because they cared about it, because literally, like, you have an apartment, it was like life or death. My great-grandfather, they decided not to become, and most Hasidim, in some way or another, they also like sent their kids to the schools. They did a lot of Mesiras Nefesh, but the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't want you to even send the kids to the school. Now, if you didn't do that, basically, they took over all property. They kicked them out of their home one night. My grandmother etched in her mind going to the shul. They lived in the women's section of a shul for like 6 years. That's where they lived. And eventually he was killed, and it wasn't an easy life. So she said, we thought that Mayasha is crazy. And now I realize she was right. And that's the thing, is that, like, we were those crazy people once in a different lifetime or something, and we're here. But the whole thing was to get to what? To get to this, to get to choosing Mashiach. That's the whole goal. So much of life, Hashem could do anything. In 1 second, he could bring a great light and everybody would run to it, or coerce people. Anything he could do. Why does he give us freedom? Because he wants us to choose it. That's the goal. So the goal in a way is not so much that Mashiach's light should come down from heaven, which it will one fine day. I remember my kid as a little boy, he said, Hashem has switches. He has a switch for the lightning, a switch for the thunder. So the point is, Hashem has a Mashiach. In 1 second, resurrection, it will all happen. But his ultimate goal is that in this time where we can choose anything, we say, no, this is my choice. I choose to live in Mashiach. And what does it mean? It's flipping the world on its head. I once heard this from Rabbi Kessler, and the Rebbe said, you want to know truth? Just turn everything upside down. Because the way you see the world is from the perspective of I exist, the world exists, and let me figure it out. But actually, it's the other way around. Hashem exists.
It's a verkehrte
Yeah, Hashem exists, and nothing exists. And Hashem chose you to be in his world, and that's a gift. And then it's also an opportunity, and it's also a responsibility. And once we understand that, you have Mashiach. There's a lady in this community that she had a very powerful near-death experience, and she saw Mashiach. And basically, everyone and everything was alive with its purpose. In other words, Mashiach isn't, the Rebbe said this, right? Goyla, Geula, the Aleph. Mashiach isn't inherently, there's nothing wrong with our world. Hashem made our world. He said, this is good. It's a beautiful world. What does it need? It just needs the merger of God and human consciousness. That I marry God's idea of reality. And what is his idea of reality? That we are Yidden, and if a person's a Gentile, that he's a Gentile, he has his mitzvahs, we have our mitzvahs. We are the world. We are the purpose of creation. And everything I do is like the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash. This whole world is God's Beis HaMikdash, and I am the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash. And when we enter that, we become as holy as the Kohen Gadol. We know that when Mashiach comes, we're going to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, each and every one of us. And we are going to be able to, why? Because we're going to have the Kedusha of the Kohen Gadol. And by dedicating our lives, like the Rebbe brings down from the Rambam, it's not only the Shevet Levi that was chosen to serve Hashem, but any person that says, okay, I'm not into having another cupcake and a Mercedes and the fanciest chocolate cake, I'm into doing the will of God. So now you are a Kohen. That's what a Kohen is, doing the will of Hashem. That's who you become. You become the Kedusha of a Levi. And in fact, the Rebbe says that Hashem it's brought down from the Rambam, has to provide for you. Now you're a worker. If you're a worker, he's your boss. So now he has to provide for you. So you become provided for as well. And this is the I would say this is the lesson to take from this class, is to really believe that we are chosen to be the Levium, we are chosen to be Hashem's people and to serve him with all our heart and with all our soul. It doesn't mean that you have to go outside of reality. No, it just means that you have to bring him inside of reality. Yes?
I want to mention last Shabbos, the Parsha, the 6th of the for me it was like wow shattering. It was like a moment so like tears. And Hashem literally